In my talk today, I will try to share some of my experiences, some of my thoughts and ideas, how we can maximize the chances of global prosperity using such powerful technology like AI, and what type of steps we should be doing to extract best out of it and understand the risks and mitigate the risks which are involved to it. Well, today, 2018, we've never been richer as a human species, we've never been smarter, and we've never been more connected than we are today, right? We accumulated enormous wealth, enormous knowledge, enormous connectivity with one another, and we created powerful technology, among them artificial intelligence, and we've never had chances such we have today and such we will have most likely in the near future to solve problems which seemed unsolvable before. And some of the issues which I'll be talking about would be related to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I'm from the UN, but these are the big goals which entire world agreed to, and these are very ambitious ones, and I will go through some of them later in my talk. Now, before we get there, I'm going to give sort of a little bit of reflections on some of the things I've done and how technology evolved in my professional lifetime as well. Let's do a little bit of a time travel. Iraq War 2003. At that time, I was working in the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, and I personally was in charge of coordinating the assistance and protection in case of use or threat of use of chemical weapons during the Gulf War. And this was the time when we trained and did a lot of capacity building in the Gulf region. And why I'm telling you all that is that in 2003, when war started, Coalition of Willings went with the state-of-art technology, military technology, into the war. It was the first time when we saw real military actions live on TV, and this was the best of the best technologies used back then, 15 years ago. And 15 years ago, during the Iraq War, there were 0 military robots used and a handful of very primitive drones, which were prepared but basically were not used because they were not useful. And what happened 15 years down the road, if we sort of accelerate our life, is that we are in 2018 and we have millions of ground military robots, and we have millions of drones, and more are in making. So we are living in a completely different era as far as the military technology is considered within 15 years of time. So this was an unbelievable acceleration. And if we took the 2018 sort of as a point of departure, if we look what was happening with the civilian technologies, that's basically where we were in 2003. And that thing, I mean this one, probably some of you remember, that's a VCR which was discontinued in 2008. The other day I showed this to my 11-year-old daughter and 8-year-old son and asked them, what do you think it is? And they were like really thinking hard, and then finally my son, yes, that's a video game, probably old video game. I said, yeah, close enough. I mean, it's like not really. But this thing was discontinued in 2008, really, it's in near term now, it's an ancient history. So we are now somewhere here and further on, and this is growing more and more. Of course, this is very obvious for all of us, but this gives me a reflection that how fast everything is changing and how unparalleled some of the policy developments have happened in meanwhile. And I will show you some of them. I mean, the future is yes, and what will happen in next 30, 40 years, obviously nobody knows. We've heard many different type of predictions. My prediction is the human-AI coexistence, but I don't know if I'll be alive in 30, 40 years to be proven wrong. Now, on the policy level, though, and especially on the global policy level, before 2015, we never really even had a single discussion related to the artificial intelligence at the United Nations. This event probably was the first attempts of AI discussions. I was chairing a panel when we invited Nick Bostrom, Max Tegmark, and others to share their thoughts related to the AI to the delegations in New York. And this had a remarkable effect. I mean, if you've seen the faces of the delegations, most of them thought that we were either joking or this was some sort of a science fiction we were bringing, or Irakli was up to something no good. I don't know. But in any case, after that, a lot of thinking had happened. I'm not saying that this triggered many other things, but basically the development of AI has triggered many different evolutions within the thinking in United Nations. When right now we have AI for Good summits, I'll be talking about it, and 32 UN agencies involved in thinking how to utilize this technology to contribute to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Now, 2017, actually before 2017, no other Secretary General of the United Nations has even mentioned artificial intelligence. This was the first time when AI was mentioned from the high podium in New York by Antonio Guterres as a powerful tool which could be a game changer for both good and bad, and new Secretary General is absolutely keen to see how this technology could be utilized for contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals or many other things which could be associated to that. And there are many very interesting developments right now happening within the UN in that sense. Now, in parallel, what we did is that the program which I started in 2014-15 later on translated into creation of first UN dedicated Center on AI and Robotics in The Hague to enhance understanding of the risk-benefit duality of this technology. Basically, the main motivation of mine and the entire center, which is being formed and is formed in The Hague, is to see how we can extract the best out of this technology, because this technology is here and this is not going to go anywhere. On the contrary, this is going to become more and more powerful, and how to see that we will bring the best out of this tool and apply to solving big problems, societal problems, big issues which we've never thought that were possible to be solved. Some of the activities the center does, we do many things, including the educational programs. We ran around already 6-7 global tailor-made training sessions for different stakeholders. We're doing certain practical projects for the benefit of the countries and benefit of the people. We started program together with Interpol, and in July, we held the first global meeting on opportunities and risks of AI for the law enforcement. Basically, the idea of that meeting in Singapore was, and it was quite a large meeting, we brought a number of member states, we brought private sector, academia, others to figure out how law enforcement can use this technology, how criminals can use the technology, and to have that understanding, and law enforcement agencies have the understanding. And the third aspect is that how to do that all to fit into the ethical boundaries of the discussion. And that's a tricky part, obviously, but we dedicated a huge part of the meeting to the ethical discussions, and we're going to have another one in January, a specialized meeting in Singapore, which will be dedicated purely to the ethics of AI and law enforcement. And we are also trying to contribute into the AI policy and AI governance, and by analyzing the issues and contributing towards these discussions. We have a big network of countries and our dedicated representatives in the regions, and we will be soon kicking off a program on AI-induced automation and how this is going to affect the social stabilities of the developing countries. Because I've mentioned it a number of times during the panel yesterday that while we have really accelerated discussions in the developed world, and which is fantastic, we have around 30 countries now adopting or adopted already their AI strategies. We don't have any real meaningful discussions in the developing world, which is absolutely necessary and very much needed, and we'll be sort of contributing towards that. Now, once we talk about the benefits, obviously there will be many different spheres, and this is not an exclusive list. I think that almost everyone potentially has the possibility to contribute, and that's why we started within United Nations something called AI for Good Summits. Some of you probably, and some of you I know that participated in this movement in Geneva. This is becoming bigger and bigger. First time we held the summit in 2017. Last year was 2018 with 32 UN agencies participating, and that's pretty big. We had private sector, academia, others, and 32 UN agencies means entire big sort of family of the United Nations coming together and trying to figure out within their mandates how and what are the programs and how they can actually use the AI-driven technologies which exist now and which will come out in the future, and how to put it all together to solve problems like these ones. So these are the goals. These are the 17 goals of the Sustainable Development of the United Nations. These are very ambitious goals with 169 targets, 230 indicators to transform the world by 2030. I encourage you all who are interested to actually Google the goals and to see the targets and especially the indicators, because these are very interesting targets. Here we're talking about some fantastic measurements that how world can be changed by 2030. I'm not saying that AI will be the only tool which will contribute to that, but AI will be the tool which will be contributing to it. Some concrete examples. For example, by 2030, with the goals to end the epidemics of AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria, neglected tropical diseases, many other things, and AI can certainly have its huge role in contributing towards that. And there will be many different applications, and I think that the healthcare would be one of the biggest beneficiaries of AI. Most of you probably will agree with me, and I really encourage everyone who is involved in that to think about, to come together with some of UN efforts led by World Health Organization. We will be contributing, and we will have some joint programs with WHO to see how these tools could be applied in the field as well. Quality of education would be certainly beneficial. If you look at it, what sort of targets we have, and this is just an example of the target that by 2030 to ensure that all girls and boys complete free, equitable and quality primary and secondary education leading to relevant and effective learning outcomes. This is a fantastic goal when education could be applied worldwide, globally, evenly, that we will not have any part of the world left out. We will not have people uneducated in developing countries where right now we have huge problems, and this is going to actually create a very unbalanced dynamic if we don't apply that education in big portion of the world, which would create problems there and in the developed world and everywhere globally as well. I was just giving an example that when there was a civil war in Syria recently, or there is a current civil war going on, we had around 1 million refugees, and this 1 million refugees almost disrupted the entire political structure of the European Union, and at least had a lot of disruptions towards that. And imagine if we will have 100 millions or hundreds of millions refugees because of the AIs applied unevenly, or AI-induced automations, or quality of education is inadequate, and people would be forced to migrate. So this could have a catastrophic effect to the world. And another example is the peace, justice, and strong institutions by 2030, significantly reduce illicit finance and arms flows, strengthen the recovery and return of the stolen assets, and combat all forms of organized crime. Because of some of these issues, we are now very closely working with Interpol. We try to figure out and see how AI could be used for the law enforcement agencies, how criminals can use it, and how this information could be redistributed to evenly globally, not to create safe havens for any type of criminal organizations where there is a huge potential that this technology could be absolutely misused. And this is some of the projects which I'm working on are primarily dedicated to that. There are many other examples of how AI is contributing to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We have here issues related to the no poverty, zero hunger, gender equality, reduced inequalities, climate action, and so on and so forth. And there are dedicated information related to each one of them. I will not go into details of all and read out, but I really do encourage you to think about it, that how your research, how your work can actually contribute towards that, and how this could be useful for any actions which United Nations is taking. And I'll be very happy to facilitate some of the programs perhaps, or some of the interactions which you might want to have with other agencies which are fully dedicated to some of the particular goals there. When we talk about the benefits, certainly we should also touch upon the issues related to the AI risks. To me, the biggest risk is the pace of development. So we all understand the trajectory is steep, and it's going even steeper. And if we don't have something fall down. It's all right. And if we don't have the adequate reaction to that, or if we don't have adequate policy reactions to that, we might actually have a very serious problems. Some of the concrete examples of risks, which I personally identify, is that AI has technological unemployment. Certainly, we have many different reports coming out. Constantly, almost every month or even weekly, we see different reports who are predicting 20 to 70% of the job losses. Some people say that jobs will not be lost, tasks will be automated. But in one way or the other, I strongly believe that we will have serious disruptions in this field. Another big risk would be AI-enhanced crimes. Huge possibilities for criminals and terrorist organizations to use AI-driven technologies, robotics. Even if you take some recent news reports, how drones were used to disrupt certain public gatherings, or even targeting presidents and others. I mean, the only thing you need to put imagination together, how criminals can use it, manipulations, political manipulations, things like impersonation, I think will be a biggest challenge to deal with for the law enforcement agencies. Another huge risk is lethal autonomous weapon systems, and there are dedicated discussions happening in Geneva. I will not go into details to that, but I'm participating in some of the expert discussions there, and I'll be happy to share some of the experiences. And obviously, superintelligence, which could lead to some identify as existential risks. Another issue which I want to touch upon very briefly here before I conclude my presentation is the AI global governance, and how we're going to basically create norms, policies, institutions, incentives, and to me, what is most important to sort of create all of that is that international verification system. I've spoken about the international verification system yesterday during one of the panel discussions. I think it's figuring out how to do the international verification would be key to the future governance, because any type of governance which would take place on AI would still require an adequate verification system. We are living in a mistrusting world. Countries are not openly trusting each other, and if you don't have an adequate verifiable system of some sort of control and checks and balances, you won't be able to have any type of AI global governance related to that. We had many different occurrences recently, and I give examples of, for example, in UK, Salisbury chemicals were used. Something happened, countries are disputing the occurrence, and we don't have a real system how to verify and check who did what, and that creates a lot of difficulties. The same thing, chemicals are used in Syria. One side is saying the other is using it, but in any case, we don't really see how, we don't have a real sort of verification which would verify the system. Now, and for the AI, it would be certainly very challenging to to create such an international verification system, and it would be up to all of us and beyond to think about what are the technical possibilities of bringing it together. This will probably take a long time, many deliberations, but I think that time has come when we really need to start thinking and working on these issues. With that, I will try to sort of conclude to that, to me, we're looking at the future, and a very important aspect would be stakeholder cooperation, when international organizations, governments, private sector, academia, civil society, and many others will come together and start working together towards goal. And this goal would be safer, healthier, happier life we all want to live in. And I encourage you all to engage in this type of stakeholder cooperation. This could be done in many different ways, and this could be applied in different ways, but it contributes toward the same goal. I'm extremely positive about this. I've seen a lot has changed within the United Nations as well. When maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, there was not much interaction between the UN and the private sector, when right now I see programs, and we as a center also are partially funded by a private sector. We see a lot of interaction between international organizations, governments, and private sector, and this is extremely encouraging. With that, I thank you so much for your attention, and I'll be happy to take some of the questions.
Thank you very much, Irakli, for a really very good presentation of what is going on. I would take just one question, because that one is really directly aimed at the UN. The question is from Max Redl. Where is Max? Yeah, in the back. What can the UN do or is doing to mitigate X risk from AGI superintelligence in particular? So I think you can just choose one or two real concrete initiatives. What is going on?
Well, I think that, first of all, to answer this question, and I don't want to take a really long time, I'd be happy to privately also discuss that. What really is United Nations? United Nations is not some sort of an isolated entity, right? United Nations is an organization which was created by member states, by current countries, 195 member states. They got together, they have rules, and they have the governing body of it, right? So United Nations does exactly what its member states telling it to do. So what's happening within the United Nations, there is already a lot of deliberations related how AI could be used for good and also for bad. There are not that much dedicated policy level discussions related to the AGI, and especially about the superintelligence. From our side, in 2015, we held a meeting at the General Assembly where we brought this issue, and the member states are aware of it. There are a number of other different initiatives which are happening within UN, which tackles some of these issues during AI for Good summits, when it's probably one of the largest gatherings of the UN related to AI. We do identify both AGI and also superintelligence is mentioned time to time. So awareness is there, and I think that closer we will get to that, more concrete sort of actions will be taken. So what I expect is that there probably will be at one point dedicated working groups created and dedicating thinking, recommendations, and some actions as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.